Welcome to the Saturday Cadence podcast. I'm Blake Biscardi, and remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. It is game week. The college football playoff starts on Friday. 3 games on Saturday, and we've got a great set of episodes for you this week, starting with this one right here, where we look at the college football playoff contenders to see which of these teams I believe can win the national championship. Now, this is a 12-team field, lots of options. We have 4 clear favorites. We're going to dive into all of that. Then on Thursday, we are going to pick the games for you, have a full breakdown of those. David and Grant will both join. So my name is Blake Biscardi, and welcome in to Saturday Cadence. It's good to have you with us. I want to look at this bracket and talk about the national championship contenders. Which teams do I think can advance all the way to the title game? Is that going to be based on merit? Is that going to be based on draw? Which teams have the easier path? Is it going to be who performed better in the regular season, roster makeup, coaching, all of it? We're going to get into it right now. No better team to start with than Oregon. They are the number 1 team in the country. They are undefeated, 13-0, the only undefeated team in college football. Now the Ducks sitting there, Dan Lanning has done a phenomenal job there. Dylan Gabriel, transfer quarterback, has coming in. This has been their blueprint for the last couple of seasons, bringing in a one-time transfer quarterback to start. It's working out. Bo Nix last year. We now have Dylan Gabriel here. Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Jordan James. Lots of stars on the Oregon offense. I think it is easy to say, you know what? Yes, Oregon is a national championship contender, and they are. They're the number 1 team in the country. They're probably the most complete team in the country. They're the only team that didn't have a blunder on its schedule. Now, did Oregon start the year hot? No, they were not an attractive team to start the year. They actually fell in the rankings for much of September. But it's not about September. The college football playoff is not about what you did in September, October. It's about how you're playing in November and in December into January. Now, can results from those months of September, October, November come back to haunt you? Absolutely, because that all comes into play with your resume on if you made the college football playoff in general, how you perform against common opponents. That maybe helps with some film here as we get into these games where not everybody is a team that you've seen before. In Oregon's case, the Buckeyes could be waiting for them if they beat Tennessee. So there's a common opponent there, a familiar foe. But if the Ducks were to get Tennessee, that's not a team that they face. So how would these matchups all play out? I do think that Oregon is at a disadvantage as the number 1 seed in this current format because they do get the winner of, we're just going to call it like it is, the best game of the first round between 2 heavy hitters, Ohio State and Tennessee and Columbus. No number 1 seed should have to play the winner of that game when you have teams, and no disrespect to SMU, Boise State, Indiana, Clemson in this field. The Ducks should get one of those teams that did not play as strong of a strength of schedule or play at the group of 5 level. They should just have a place in this playoff here. Now, not that Boise can't make a run, but all things considered, you want to give the most favorable path to the number 1 overall seed, because that's a benefit of winning all of your games. That's the reward for winning your conference in the Big Ten, which is the second toughest conference in college football. It's a reward for earning a 13-0 record with the number 1 overall seed. But I think the Ducks can do it. I think they've beaten Ohio State already. They can do it again. Maybe they don't get Ohio State. Maybe Tennessee pulls the upset and they get them. I don't think those teams match up as well as you would want for a team like Tennessee because Oregon can score. Now, maybe Oregon's not going to put up 40, but Oregon's defense is still pretty good and underrated. I think that Oregon can handle business against Tennessee. I think the team they would not want to see in that quarterfinal in the Rose Bowl would be Ohio State. There's a revenge factor there. They are a familiar opponent, so I think that's the team Oregon would not want. But then if Oregon gets through there, I think they can handle Texas, Arizona State, Clemson, any of those 3 teams and find their way into the national championship. So Oregon is certainly a contender for me. They are the favorites or one of the favorites to win the national championship game. So the Ducks, absolutely. Georgia's a team that gets more interesting because when you look at the Dogs, their body of work this year, they got run off the field in Tuscaloosa in the first half. It's been pretty good since then for the Dogs, aside from the Ole Miss game. Okay. You look at this team, Carson Beck, he had that middle stretch of the season where he was a turnover machine. So this is where I say it can go one of 2 ways for Georgia. Well, is Carson Beck going to play. We don't know. It's likely he's going to miss at least the Sugar Bowl. But Georgia as a roster has good talent. They have good pieces. Now they've struggled to run the football. So if you look at this team and it's anyone else other than Georgia with those components, I would probably say they're a fringe contender, but Georgia's been there before. Kirby Smart knows how to win. He's going to convince that team and program that they're somehow doubted and an underdog. And that is like gasoline on a fire in Athens. I think Georgia is a contender. And you look at this, and all the talk on this bottom half of the bracket is about Penn State. Can Notre Dame make a run? No one's really sitting there saying, oh, you know what? Georgia's going to get to the national championship game. I think they can handle business. They're all saying, you know what? They could trip up against Notre Dame. And you know what? They can. Can Penn State, James Franklin, finally get over the hump? I don't know, man. I'm telling you, I think that Georgia is going to be underrated in this playoff. And I think that they are a national championship contender. And that might come as a surprise to some. But if you're watching college football and you know the dynamics of these games in that spot, it's different. It's a different atmosphere than a regular season game or a conference championship game. This is rare air. And you look at teams like Notre Dame, Indiana, Boise State, Penn State, SMU, none of the other teams have tasted a playoff atmosphere beside Georgia. Those players have been there before. They missed last year. There's a hunger to get back this year. I know it's an expanded format, but up above, Texas has playoff experience. Ohio State has playoff experience. And Georgia. They're the only three teams with playoff experience in the whole field. Georgia's a title contender, and I think Georgia makes it out of that bottom half of the bracket. So we will have full picks again for the games, but a little tilt there. Georgia will get to the national championship game potentially in this playoff. And it really, with Georgia and the quarterback situation, is it Gunnar Stockton? Who is going to be under center? When a backup quarterback comes in, we saw this with Cardale Jones in Ohio State, things change. You don't have film on that. There's ways to scheme around a first-time starter. But Georgia's defense is good. It's not as good as it was in 2021, but Georgia's defense is really, really good. So I will take the Dogs as a contender. The next team that I think can win this is Ohio State. And the reason why Ohio State wasn't two, they have to play Tennessee. They have to potentially play Oregon. They have to potentially play Texas. And then potentially Georgia. No team in the country has endured a stretch like that ever. Well, the Buckeyes may have to do it 4 straight weeks in a row. Now, the talent is there, absolutely, to do that. Maybe there's upsets along the way, but Ohio State is guaranteed at least 2 of those teams to play. Tennessee first, they win that game. They are guaranteed a game against Oregon. Past that, it's hypotheticals because we have to see who actually wins those games. But for Ohio State, Will Howard has got to play better. He's got to command the offense, and they've got to stretch the field vertically. That's something they've not done in the back half of the season. Travion Henderson and Quinshad Judkins, 2 of the best running backs in the country. Production levels a little bit lower than anticipated this year, but Ohio State's hurt on the offensive line. And I think this is what's gotten the Buckeyes into trouble in this back half of the season, especially since that second offensive line injury happens where Seth McLaughlin, he ruptures his Achilles. Okay. Ohio State got lulled into the trap against Michigan that they have to be this team that runs the football first. It was an identity thing. That's not Ohio State's identity right now, down 2 linemen. Now, could they have done that earlier in the season or could they have done that in other games? And yes, they did that. But right now, your identity on offense could not be a run first team. And the same thing with Tennessee. Tennessee is going to want to lull them into this physical rock fight in the cold, run the football, deal with our defensive line. Ohio State can't do that. This is almost a repeat of the Michigan game setup. Now, Tennessee's a better team than Michigan, but stylistically, they approach the game the same way. Now, Tennessee has a better quarterback and wide receivers, but Ohio State can't just go and say, we're back at home, we're going to try to force feed run the football. No, Ohio State's not running between the tackles against Tennessee. Now, they may have to run at James Pierce and, good luck, but you can run to the other side. They're probably going to move them around, so they're going to have to do a lot of pre-snap checking. Ohio State needs to play to its strengths. It needs to play to its identity. Who is Ohio State under Ryan Day? Because who Ohio State is under Ryan Day, I know they've lost to Michigan 4 straight years. It's not the team that has showed up in that game for the last 2 years. It's not. That's not the identity of the program. The identity of the program is a pro style offense that can run the football, that has really good elite level wide receivers, a downfield vertical passing attack, and then now with Jim Knowles, a very good defense. They don't have to go out and score 40 anymore. This team can win a game 17-14 if they need to. You know what? They should also be able to win a game 38-35. They should be able to win either game, and they have the talent and the depth to do that. That's the path and the recipe for Ohio State to make a run in the playoff. If they do that, the defense is going to play well. The defense is going to hold its own. The defense should have won the Michigan game, but the offense let it down. Ryan Day cannot lose a game in Columbus because of the offense again. That's his area. For the Buckeyes, I think that they can beat Tennessee. That gives them a revenge spot against Oregon in the Rose Bowl, a place Ohio State's familiar with. They were there in 2021 with Utah. After that, it's Texas, and then potentially Georgia. I think Ohio State's a contender. I really do. And I think there's something to say about when a team loses and gets backed into a corner. We saw that against Penn State. Chip Kelly was in his bag against Penn State with the play calling on offense for Ohio State. Now, 2 turnovers, notwithstanding, because you can't script those, that game looks vastly different for the Ohio State offense. That's the Chip Kelly that needs to come out for Ohio State, call a great game with an elite game plan, because Ohio State backed into a corner. You have 2 options, fight or flight. You run from the challenge or you run into the challenge. Ohio State needs to run into the challenge. They need to show up. They need to be motivated. They win that first game. That gets you confidence. Now you're going into this game where pressure's on Oregon. They're the number 1 team in the country. They're going to be favored. Early point spread on that game. If we get it, Oregon -1.5. Ohio State can do that. That is their path. Then it gets easier from there, which is crazy. The playoffs shouldn't get easier as you go deeper into the tournament, but flawed college football, you got to love it. I heard it. Okay. It actually could get easier for the Buckeyes. This is no disrespect to the potential teams that they could play: Clemson, Texas, Arizona State, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia. No disrespect there. Really tough draw to get Tennessee first. Even tougher draw to get Oregon second should the Buckeyes win that first game. But they are a contender. I think they can get to the national championship, and I think they can win it. If Ohio State gets to the national championship game, I do think that they would win it, just because of the confidence that they would be playing with and all the things they've overcome to get there. That's just how I feel about it if Ohio State gets there. I think Ohio State's got to get out of the quarterfinals, and then I think they can breathe a little bit and have that confidence going into that championship game. After that is Texas. And again, like Georgia, I think these are very comparable teams, and we've seen that in the matchups this year. So Texas, when you look at the Longhorns, okay, Quinn Ewers, up and down year. Arch Manning's been good off the bench. He's had some spots where, you could see the inexperience. But man, if Quinn Ewers has a rough half and Texas is down or it's a tight game, does Steve Sarkisian turn to Arch? Similarly to Nick Saban with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa. Just think about it. That's a potential for Texas. Texas could win the national championship this year with Arch Manning. And that might be the best chance that they have to win it. So, lots of talk has gone around about Quinn Ewers getting offered some big money from a Big Ten school to transfer, because Texas is very clear that this is Ewers last year, because to go to the draft, no bad blood, but they're ready to turn the page to Arch Manning, because if they don't, Arch is going to go in the transfer portal most likely, because he doesn't want to sit around and wait. He's already been there 2 years. So Texas, with Isaiah Bond, with that defense, it is one of the best defenses in the country. Okay. Texas can absolutely win the national championship, but Texas has to play to its potential. Now, against Clemson, they don't have to play the A-, A+ game to win, but against Arizona State, a team that's hot, they can score. That you're going to probably need your B+ to A- game to win. But in the semifinal of the national championship, they have to play the A- to A+ game. They don't have a choice. But Texas hasn't done that recently. So can they do it? Can Steve Sarkisian pull that out of his guys. That's what Texas has to do to win the title because roster-wise, they have it. They have the pieces. They built this team for this moment. And they've not beaten Georgia this year. So there's all this overrated talk. Is Steve Sarkisian's team overrated? Well, you know what? They haven't beaten anybody this year that's ranked. Vanderbilt is their best win. They beat Michigan 7-5. They beat Ohio State. Okay, transitive property. But big picture, Texas hasn't beaten anyone. And what's to say that, okay, maybe Clemson isn't anyone, or maybe Arizona State's not anyone. Sure, you can win those first two games. But can you go beat either Block O team because you have Oregon and Ohio State? Can you go beat Tennessee, should they get there? Can you go beat Georgia? Can you beat Notre Dame? All those teams. So for Texas, it's we have to find our ceiling. What gives us the best chance to do that? Is it Quinn Ewers? Is it Arch Manning? And I'm not trying to call for Ewers' job, but these are all things Texas has to think about because this is Ewers' third year in the system, and they can't quite seem to get to the top of the mountain. They have the right pieces. It's in there. Ewers is a good quarterback. Can Steve Sarkisian unlock this team that has now lost to Georgia twice this year in this college football playoff to go make a run and win the national championship game? That is the key for Texas to get to the title game. Those are the things that they have to do. Steve Sarkisian has to unlock the offense somehow, and that starts and finishes with Quinn Ewers. Can he raise his level of play enough to go win the title? Because it's clear they've not beaten Georgia. What's to convince me that they can beat Oregon or that they can beat an Ohio State team or that they can beat a Tennessee team? What's to say that? There's not any empirical evidence to show that Texas can do that. We're talking about potential energy with this team because we keep saying Texas has a ceiling they haven't reached yet. Is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? Because, man, if they hit it, you better watch out because that's a really, really good football team. Will we end the season saying the same thing we did with Texas at the beginning of the season? That's the big question. Can Steve Sarkisian figure that out between now and Saturday? We'll see. After this, I think this is widely agreed upon. You can take a little break in the contenders. I want to talk about a couple more teams because I don't think that all 12 teams can win the playoff. There's a break here. Notre Dame is going to be my fifth team that I want to discuss. So Marcus Freeman's team, they go into Kyle Field week 1 at night. Riley Leonard, they escape with a victory. Hard fought game in the teeth of that crowd. Really tough environment. Then they go and lose to NIU in week 2. Tumultuous loss. I mean, you want to talk about a tale of 2 weeks for Notre Dame? That was it. They got written off so fast. Well, guess what? 10 weeks go by. They're one of the hotter teams in the country. They've been blowing teams out, running them out of the building. Now, all of a sudden, they find themselves on the more favorable side of the bracket. And I know seeing the big G in the quarterfinals might not be all that enticing and say, well, I don't think that's the most favorable. Well, would you rather play Georgia with potentially no Carson Beck, or would you rather play Dylan Gabriel and Oregon, Will Howard and Ohio State, Nico Amalavea and Tennessee, Quinn Ewers, Arch Manning and Texas, Drew Aller and Penn State? I mean, pick your poison there for the Irish. But they get Notre Dame and Indiana matched up in the first round. It's a home game for the Irish. Big game for the state of Indiana. How cool is that? A standalone spot, Friday night, 8:00. So if they win that first game, which I think they do, and Carson Beck is out for Georgia, Notre Dame has the pieces to beat them. But Notre Dame, historically, for the last 30 years in this spot, they don't get it done. This is the moment that you change that. Marcus Freeman from Brian Kelly. Are they going to become the same type of coach? Good enough, but never enough nationally on the big stage. Maybe you win a game in the regular season over Clemson. Maybe you beat Georgia in the regular season. Maybe you go win this game against Texas A&M. But when push comes to shove in the postseason, it's not good enough. That's the barrier Notre Dame has to get over in this tournament. And I think that they can do that. I legitimately think one of the hardest choices I had making my bracket in this whole 12 team playoff, I actually switched the pick, is the quarterfinal matchup. And what I think Notre Dame beats Indiana is between Notre Dame and Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I actually think that is one of the most coin flipped games for me in this whole bracket. And I have Ohio State beating Tennessee playing Oregon. So I have a lot of respect for Marcus Freeman in that program. Riley Leonard's going to have to find a way to throw the ball. That was something they couldn't do early. But that run game is ferocious. They can control the clock. That defense, amazing. It is an outstanding defense, very stout. Notre Dame is a team that can sneak into the national championship game for me. So I think that they're underrated. Those are my 5 teams that I think can win the national championship. I have 5. Now I'm going to talk about the rest of the teams very briefly. The first one being Penn State, because Penn State has the most favorable path of any team in the history of postseason tournaments. They're playing SMU at home in a whiteout. I know the game's at noon, but still, it's going to be like 15 degrees. And then Boise State, again, no offense, but it's a group of 5 teams. So any team in the tournament would say, yeah, sure, please sign me up for the 6 seed. If Oregon, they're 13-0, absolutely, give us a 6 seed. We'd rather take that than be the number 1 overall seed, play in the Rose Bowl, and host Ohio State or Tennessee. Forget that. They'd rather take Penn State's seed. So Penn State, they have the game. Again, like I said, SMU, Boise State, they should walk to the semifinal. Can James Franklin win a big game then? Because you know what? It's not a big game for me if he beats SMU. And it's not a big game for me if he beats Boise State. Because you know what? He's supposed to win that game by double digits. He's supposed to beat SMU by more than a touchdown, their team. That's not James Franklin got over the big game hump. No. If you see Notre Dame in a semifinal, if you see Georgia in a semifinal, that's a big game. Because that's a game you might be favored in, or it might be a pick 'em. But that is a game that is a matchup style game that you have to win. And all this talk with James Franklin, can he engineer his team to win 4 straight games in a postseason tournament? I just don't think so. Now, they can easily, I would not be surprised if Penn State's sitting in the semifinal, even the national championship game, just because of the way the draws could work. But in the semifinal, I wouldn't even be surprised. I'd be like, yep, sure, absolutely. Championship game, be like, all right, maybe he can do it. But Penn State, that's the team that I want to watch because of the past, James Franklin, how the team looks. Do they look tight? Are they loose? Because this could work in the inverse for them too. Oregon knows they have a street fight and a half coming, regardless of who wins that game in Columbus. Penn State, on the other hand, do you see how I'm talking about them? Oh, easy. They're going to win that game. SMU, forget it. They don't belong. Boise State, group of 5 team. The pressure's on Penn State. How do they handle it? Because it works in the inverse. When you know you got a heavyweight fight coming, you're prepared. But when you know that you're the overwhelming opponent, do you look past them? That's the spot I think Penn State could be in the quarterfinal against Boise State. Ashton Genty, second place in the Heisman voting, had a great case to win it. Couldn't go wrong with either him or Travis Hunter. But Penn State, they're going to be juiced for that game against SMU. It's at home. I don't think they have issues there. I think they could have issues with Boise State. That's the game that I would watch. How does Penn State handle that moment? Outside of that, I could see Clemson upsetting Texas if things get sideways. They win the turnover battle. I can see Arizona State potentially giving either team a run there in the quarterfinal in the Peach Bowl to get to the semi. I can't see Arizona State past there. Boise, like I just alluded to, I can see where if they get Penn State there, they can pull the upset. But again, I don't think it's likely, less than 50% confidence. SMU, different story. I think Boise could win that game and then get to a semifinal. I don't think they could advance further than that. Indiana, I don't see how they can win 2 games. I can see them upsetting Notre Dame potentially. Even that, again, low confidence pick there. I just don't see Indiana beating Notre Dame and Georgia back to back, even if Carson Beck doesn't play and get to a semifinal. So I really have trouble saying, they're a contender. Tennessee, again, I can see them beating Ohio State. I could see them giving Oregon trouble. I don't think they can win both of those games. I don't think they win the first one, but I think it's going to be a great game in Columbus. I don't know how Tennessee gets out of that region, to be honest with you. I mean, if they get out of that region, sky's the limit, and they could absolutely go win the whole thing. And Tennessee is my fringe team here. If they win that first game, I will change my tune dramatically of how I view them in this playoff because they can absolutely go win it with that team, with that defense, with Dylan Sampson, James Pierce, Nico Amalavea. I mean, lots of pieces on this Tennessee team. Josh Heupel's offense, really creative, really good. They don't have to just air it out. It's not an air raid team anymore. They are a balanced offense. They run the ball actually very well and physically. That defense also just very stout. We saw them keep Jalen Milroe in check when they beat Alabama in Neyland. So Tennessee is my wait and see team. They're my X factor in this bracket if they win the first game. Again, I'm giving you my pick to this. I have Ohio State winning at home. But if Tennessee can figure it out, they're the X factor team where, okay, let's see what they can do because they have the pieces there. It's just, can they do it once, twice, three times, and four for a title? So that's how I see this college football playoff field right now. Those are the contenders. I'll remind you again. I have Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas as my top four, which again mirrors Vegas. Notre Dame being my fifth best. Two X factors here, Penn State and Tennessee. And then I don't see a path for multiple wins for Clemson, Arizona State, SMU, Boise State, or Indiana. That is how I view the field. These games are going to be outstanding. I think even that scene that we're going to get in South Bend College Game Day is going to be there Friday night. And then again, they'll move to Columbus for Saturday morning. It's going to be awesome. This playoff is giving us some great games. Again, format's got to change. We know that. Can't control it this year, can't change it. So we're going to relish it. We're going to live in it. We're going to make the most of it. That is what we're supposed to do as college football fans. We don't have any control over what can happen. Sitting here in the media, we can have influence. We can talk about it. We can say our opinion. That's what we're doing. But let's relish in this moment. It's going to be a great playoff. Cannot wait for these games to start and then to be capped with Ohio State, Tennessee in the horseshoe. Ross Bjork was on the podcast with Austin Ward and Jeremy Birmingham last week. He was talking about the scene that's going to unfold in the horseshoe. Whew, going to be good. Got some LEDs, a light show, Ohio State wearing the all scarlet uniforms, and the CFP will have some control over the video board, which, again, ridiculous that the away team on a home video board gets a hype video. But again, it's a postseason game. Just make it all or nothing. Give the home team full control or just use it as the venue. It is what it is here, but we'll see. There's going to be a drone show, a light show. It's going to be a wild atmosphere in Columbus. Game day is going to be there. Sub 25-degree temperatures. It's going to be cold. December. Big Ten weather football for the Buckeyes. We'll see how they're doing it. Again, make sure you are tuned in for the Thursday show. We're going to break all these first-round games down, give you our official picks. We're going to have all the details for you. You will not want to miss this show. Appreciate all the great feedback on last week's show where we gave our full bracket predictions. That was a great show. Had a lot of fun doing that one. Got pretty spirited there at the end with the Ryan Day debate, but that's what this is all about. We have a lot of fun doing the show together. We appreciate you guys listening to us. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, like and subscribe to it. Leave us a review. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We will see you next time on Thursday for the prediction show. Remember, the Saturday Cadence podcast is the heartbeat of college football. My name is Blake Biscardi. We will see you on Thursday. God bless.